Thank you. It was beautiful. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Welcome to the Treasure Coast Unitarian Universalist Congregation in Stuart, Florida. Today is August 22nd, 2021. My name is Deb Harris, and I'll be your worship associate today. We are a welcoming congregation. We welcome people of all gender identities, races, ages, and backgrounds. It's wonderful to see all our vaccinated and masked members in the sanctuary. And although we usually are streaming live on YouTube as well, today the YouTube video will be posted after the service because the internet is down. For anyone new to be put on our email list or to find out more information about us, please go to our website at tcuuc.org, and you'll get announcements in our Friday online newsletter. Our piano player is eager today.
The piano player is a little bit of a bully.
We're so pleased to have the Reverend Dr. John Brown III as our guest in the pulpit today. He said I don't have to say all this, but I'm going to anyway because I want you to know what a wealth of experience he brings to our service today. He's a retired ordained United Methodist minister and a fellow in the American Association of Pastoral Counselors. He's also a semi-retired pastoral psychotherapist and a supervisor with the Westchester Institute for Training in Psychotherapy. As a teacher, grandparent, great-grandparent, and pastoral counselor, he's worked with individuals who've struggled with communication issues for over 45 years. We are always honored to have him here. In terms of announcements, please see the Friday newsletter for announcements of events, activities, other news. It's available on the website. I would like to note that it is a special birthday weekend for two of our members. Regina Wood's birthday was on Thursday and Karina's on Friday, so we wish them the best. A big thank you to those who are helping with today's service. First of all, Jackie and her pianist for the music, and to our designated singers, our greeters, ushers, our host, Karina Poloni, and our tech wizard, Chris McGann. We couldn't do service without everyone. Now, Reverend John will light the chalice, and our words this morning for the chalice lighting are from Atticus Palmer. We call this light before us in hope that we may always remain a strong community, working together to make the world a better place. When we are grieving or sad, when we're challenged, when we need help, this flame guides us out of the darkness. When we're cheerful, when we celebrate, when we accomplish a great task, when we return to a place, this place that makes us happy, the chalice reminds us to share our happiness with others. These days, I often find myself kind of feeling a mixture of anger and despair, kind of just below the surface. When I think about all the tragic world and state events that seem to escalate weekly. Sometimes these feelings bubble up even over very small things. This week, I almost got into a fight with a proudly non-mask-wearing woman in Publix. What bothered me wasn't that we gave each other what we call in Hawaii stink eye, but that I really wanted to escalate it into a fight. Like I was itching to get into it with her. And even though her not wearing a mask bothered me, what bothered me more was my reaction. So later that night, I went back to one of my favorite go-tos, John Pavlovich's Hope and Other Superpowers. I found it helpful, and I hope you will too, if you've had any of these feelings. I'm going to read just a few excerpts, and I'm skipping around, so it's not as coherent as if you were reading the book yourself. It can be a daily battle to keep our hearts soft and to treat the world gently, but we desperately need to. After all, life is heavy. For most of us, on our very best days, even when everything breaks just right, we're still carrying around the near-crushing weight of our relational fractures, financial pressures, marital collapses, physical illnesses, existential crises, and frustration that, despite the exorbitant price and seductively convincing promises of that anti-wrinkle cream, the damn cream doesn't seem to work. Because of these accumulated disappointments and the daily abrasion we feel, there's an irritability that's close to the surface. It causes us to easily grow impatient in the checkout line, to erupt in expletive-laden tirades in the traffic, to tell off complete strangers on Twitter, and to blow up at our spouses and kids over socks left on the ground. We are all increasingly prone to explosion. We are all in need of kindness to diffuse us. The path to a kinder world begins with kinder people. And the way we become those kinds of kind people, as with many of the truest truths in life, is both startlingly simple and incredibly elusive. We try to live in such a way that we hurt people less. The Latin phrase, which I won't do well, primum non nocere, is part of all healthcare students' education. For doctors, nurses, and other caregivers, roughly translated, it means first do no harm. It's the promise to protect a patient from undue injury, to do everything in your power toward that goal, and to avoid further damage to someone in the process of trying to save a life. He goes on to say, basically, we can follow these same simple steps in our daily life. And here are some notes on how to do that. Speak love. Offer kind words to as many people as you can, and most of all to the people close to you who may have forgotten that they need them. Give compliments and encouragements freely. Smile at people. In a world that's grown more acerbic and mean, the people you encounter are likely starving for simple warmth, and you can feed people without needing to say a word. Exercise simple decency. Hold doors for people. Offer to help them with their bags. Let someone have the closer parking spot. Overtip a server. Anticipate a need and fill it. Keep your eyes open for people around you facing difficulty, a surgery, a layoff, losing a spouse. Step into their space by doing something that they didn't know they needed to ask for. The kindness we're bereft of is not found in the bombastic and the noteworthy and the attention's getting, but in the small, simple ways we show people grace below the radar. Kindness is the anti-venom to the cruelty we're saturated with. Handling people with care, treating them with a softness that they so rarely encounter these days is important. Many people we cross paths with are hanging by the thinnest of threads. Showing them simple attention, affection, and kindness without knowing it, we get to strengthen that thread. Go easy on people. Treat them gently. Be the kind of kind people who can save the world. So thank you, John. And now we'll have our designated singers come forward and socially distance, but two of you can sing directly into the microphones for hymn 355. And for the rest of us, we'll sing through our masks. And choir, please stay up after the hymn. We're going to do the first three verses. All right. And now let us recite our affirmation, speaking the first verse and singing the second. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. Below the stars, rise, that beauty, truth, and glory song, through every and by every dawn. Amen. Thank you. Choir may be seated. And now it's time to share our personal joys and sorrows. Please, for this, step up to the microphone one at a time to speak. You may remove your mask to tell us your name and then share your joy or sorrow. Please try to keep it personal and brief. You or Reverend John will move a stone in our symbolic river of life to mark that joy or sorrow.
Good morning. For anyone that doesn't happen to know me, I'm Christopher McGowan. I have a sorrow this week. A friend of mine, his mother was an anti-vaxxer, so he's lived his whole life with polio. He was just diagnosed with lung cancer, so I had to move my flight up. They don't think he's going to make it till the end of September, so I fly out on Friday to go see him. Thanks.
Good morning. My niece yesterday posted a very heart-wrenching note on Facebook about what it's like to be a nurse working in a part of Texas in an ICU unit where even the relatives of some of the COVID patients think it's a hoax. I ask that you keep her and all these healthcare workers in your hearts and minds.
Hi, I'm Pam. I'm in 2 therapy groups. One is I'm in a therapy group with some other people from church, and that's the pool therapy group. And what's going on is that while you're in the pool, in the jacuzzi, you're telling each other your heartfelt cares and concerns. And this is happening. There are more COVID divorces coming up. And even though the courthouse is closed from time to time because of COVID, a friend of mine, her husband has done the last thing that she can possibly bear, and that is in 3 years, he's never made dinner. And COVID and the non-dinner making has decided her to leave her husband and get a divorce. And I'm asking that we all turn around and look at each other and ask, can you love the person? Can you not love? It's a brave decision to not love the person, to say, this is my Waterloo. And I want to ask you all to look inward and say, is there something I can do to show love and concern? Am I acting the same way that I've always acted? And is that damaging? And thank you for listening. And I've offered my friend my house. She might have to leave her husband and come over to live with me for a time. Thank you.
David Gray. My concern is for the many people in Haiti. I am one of the few people probably in this congregation who's actually spent time there and seen the level of poverty and the hunger and the living conditions those people suffer through. Nature seems to have it in for Haiti. And only, according to the Washington Post, only 0.17 of the people who live there have one vaccination against COVID. So it's going to be a nation, I'm afraid, that will be practically erased if something is not done. So open your hearts if you can when you're asked for a donation for that purpose.
Last one. I have a dear friend. Her sister, and her mother, all vaccinated, got breakthrough infections of COVID. She and her sister, who's a cancer survivor, were very, very ill. They are better now. That's my joy. The sorrow is that her mom died this morning at 3 o'clock of COVID. All right. And now we have a meditation on anger.
It is very nice to be with you this morning when Reverend Bob called me some time ago. He said, John, we'd like you to preach on the 22nd. I said, I'd be delighted to. So it is so good to be with you, and I look forward to be with you again on October the 10th and to share with you some thoughts. I'd like to share with you now some thoughts on anger. As you've heard from Deb, that the issue of anger certainly is one of the central emotions that certainly is pervasive right now in not only in American society, but on this planet. And I felt called to share these words with you. A healer once said, ducks don't do anger. Ducks fight over a piece of bread and then just swim away. Well, what happens to their emotions? Do they stay away from that body of water because they're fearful of that duck being there again? Are their feelings suppressed or repressed? Well, we just don't know. And yet, on the other hand, maybe that approach works, not engaging in a physical confrontation. Who knows? Maybe they say to themselves, oh, I managed to stay out of a fight that time. Wow, I'm really lucky. Well, in our moments of anger, I believe it's important at this particular time in the life of our country and as individuals, as Unitarians, to reflect on this emotion called anger, because it reaps negative or positive results. In fact, some relationships are deeply scarred by the expression of anger. In those moments of anger, some people move into what we call a fight, freeze, or flight mode, which I will touch on in my sermon. For others, anger causes internal stress with the consequences of guilt, remorse, deep sadness. And when we are intensely angry, we are often the primary ones who suffer. In fact, all types of chemicals are released with excessive anger. In fact, we can really injure this unique gift called the human body when there is excessive anger. And yet, on the other hand, for some people with the use of anger, an issue is clarified. The air is cleared, and intimacy for some individuals is the outgrowth of their expression of this emotion. Now, there are numerous reasons for anger, so it is best to understand and grow from the reasons or the reason for our anger. For some people, anger is an expression of a deep, very deep, and pronounced hurt from the past. As Deb said to you, I'm not only a clergyman, but a psychoanalyst and a psychotherapist, and I observed over 40 years of working with individuals and couples that a lot of this deep anger needed to be expressed and verbalized. And once it was, there was a sense of freedom, a sense of liberation from their past. For the person or situation in not meeting a need of theirs, how do they respond? Well, they show anger. For others, it's a large cry for love. In some cases, it is a habit of reacting to life circumstances. Some health conditions can lead to excessive anger, including some medications which play a role in eliciting some anger. An overactive thyroid, diabetes, in some cases depression, are signals where we need to really stop and we really need to obtain medical intervention. Anger, there's no doubt, can be related to grief. We don't have the loved one to talk with, to care for, or meet important needs. So we might feel rejection, loneliness, or even fear in addition to our anger. But don't get me wrong, anger is a normal reaction when it is managed appropriately and handled responsibly. Sometimes, for some individuals, it is actually a motivator. And there is what is called righteous indignation. And I find this expression of anger to be used by Unitarians. And you use it well, I must tell you. Especially when there are acts of injustice, or there's abuse of the environment, or people are hurting other people. You can pretty well guarantee, I have found, that Unitarians are somewhere in the voice opposing those who are committing acts of injustice. By naming and recognizing the many faces of anger, staying present with it as it arises, keeping the open heart, breathing our ways of making friends with this emotion. I like what Deb said earlier, that one of the antidotes, and I believe this to be true, and she didn't say the word antidote, but I'll say it, is kindness. Kindness is one of the central antidotes when anger is felt inward or we experience from others. Meditation is another way of resolving our anger. Meditation not only invites us to witness anger, but also to get to know and to develop from it. It gives us a midpoint between expressing anger and expressing it. And we don't want to repress it, but we want to find ways of expressing our feelings. Meditation is not going to make all our challenges go away, but it does enable us to rest in an inclusive acceptance of who we are. And ideally, we transcend or again grow from our anger. As our third principle reads, may you understand this emotion so that you can clear the air to accept one another, and may you emotionally and spiritually grow from your knowledge of this feeling that certainly is not diminishing within our societies, but is quite evident.
And now we'll have our choir step forward to sing our hymn, Spirit of Life. We'll hum once and then sing. And Reverend John is not only our minister for today, but he has a hidden talent of playing the piano as well as the guitar, so he'll be accompanying Jackie. And now it's time for our offering. The raiders will come forward. Your support, the free and generous support of each and every member and friend of this community, is what fuels this community and its mission. Without your support, the flame of justice, community, and love cannot burn to warm ourselves and be a beacon in the world. So please share generously as you are able. Thank you, Jackie, and thank you for your contributions. We gratefully accept your gift. And now, Reverend John.
I'm always most appreciative of the talent that's so evident in this church. I want to steal Jackie some time to come over and play for our Unitarian Fellowship in Vero sometime. Okay, I got a thumbs up on that. And Debbie, wonderful reader, wonderful person who reflects and really considers the deeper issues that we all face. And certainly that wonderful team of Chris and Jackie behind there that are able to put together all these electronics. So we not only see it, but those who could not be here can view it also. And I must tell you, I was so glad to hear that Reverend Bob McDonald was going to be your minister some time ago. I've known Bob since the 1970s. We play tennis together, and we meet monthly and share with one another. And a man who cares and loves and is committed to the Unitarian Fellowship, who is one of the most gifted leaders in the fellowship, and certainly is very committed and loves this congregation very much. And I resound and echo with him the reasons for that. You are a good congregation. You're committed, and you're here, and you're committed. And I just want to say thank you to all of you. A wonderful Unitarian principle reads, "The goal of world community is peace, liberty, and a justice for all." For some, these goals can be very exciting and may unfold discoveries that benefit not only our lives, but the lives of those who are families and friends and even strangers. On the other hand, this search can be extremely frustrating and challenging, to say the least. And due to the pursuit of this important principle, conflict certainly, I believe, is a natural occurrence and can have inward or outward effects on relationships, including communities and certainly in other countries. Look at this past week, these past few weeks, with all the conflicts and things that have been going on about this vaccine. You know, should I have it? Should I not have it? It's going to hurt me. I better not do it. And the community where I live right now, it's now required that if you're going to work for our community in Vero, you are to have the vaccine by the middle of September, or you best find employment somewhere else. There are others, because of religious reasons and physical reasons, they do not take the vaccine, and I can understand. But there are too many people, frankly, who can have that vaccine. And what are we hearing right now? We have a Delta variant, but now we have a Delta plus variant. We have Lambda variants. Oh, I hope there will not be any more conflict, tension, stress. We look at the issue of wearing masks. People are really asking, should I or should I not? And yet science And common sense, I believe, tells us we need to wear a mask, don't we? But often deep wounds happen because as human beings, we often do not know how to manage effectively, creatively, the differences with those who are strangers and with those who are our family and friends. But let's be honest. It is inevitable that when two people live together or relate with one another on an in-depth level, they will experience conflict, which can divide families and friends, sometimes for a short period of time and sometimes for a lifetime, which brings me to the question, what are some of the dynamics interwoven with this word called conflict? Most conflict in human relationships finds expression in behavior. One form is called flight. For example, a parent reminds their teenage daughter of the house rule. No one is to leave on Saturday morning until the house is thoroughly cleaned. I see some nods. I think some of you have that rule in your household as well. The child who doesn't like that mandate may become suddenly silent because they don't like it. They don't like that rule, and they may avoid the conflict. They physically or emotionally flee, and sometimes they sneak out when they can physically because they really do not want to deal with the conflict, and so they flee. Then we find, too, that another child may become very upset when that happens, and they are the persons that flee. But there are the persons, though, that become very upset and start to get into that fight mode, and they outwardly express anger. How dare you, mother? I need to go see my friend. I need to go to that band practice. And they become angry and express the anger. And the expression of anger finds expression through the raging of the voice, facial expressions, pumping of adrenaline, other physical reactions. And some people physically or emotionally leave or try to sneak out. But some people just simply stay there. And they're, well, like deer with a light in its eyes. They become frozen. They can't say anything one way or the other. They're just in that freeze moment. Many people live in a shutdown response, and they do not search for the meaning or even the truth because they don't want to fail or to get in trouble. So rather than argue with the parent or rather than physically leave, they just become frozen. But let's now move beyond the descriptors of conflict and actively find ways of actually managing conflict, which is really my second point and the emphasis of my message. Before we begin our journey of managing conflict, I believe we need to stop and reflect on our own self. A basic foundation in any journey with conflict is to be aware of our identity. Who are you before a conflict starts? Who do you become once a conflict emerges or erupts? Now, our identity may be classified by any number of things, such as religion, gender, or ethnicity. Such traits, such as race, are set at birth. When we do not have a strong sense of self, this struggle we've discovered through social science and psychology leads to anxiety and insecurity. Where conflict is evident, the consequence of anxiety or insecurity might sabotage our ability to be effective parents, partners, or agents of peace. The third principle in our denomination reads, the acceptance of one another and encouragement to spiritual growth in our congregations. When we grow spiritually, be mindful that we need to also accept ourselves. So are you persons who do like who you are? If not, I hope you're working on that. Our journey requires an understanding and acceptance of self-identity. It's certainly advantageous to be encouraging when we seek to grow spiritually. When we break down the word encouragement, we find courage is an integral aspect of our identity and being creative in conflict. If I'm an individual who is unsure about my beliefs or my values regarding an issue, and I'm excessively tired, I encourage you maybe not to engage in a conflict with a friend or a foe. For example, an aspect of identity is based on the value of peace. being a calming presence in the beginning of a conflict requires my behavior to be that of a peacemaker. When we are clear about our identity and our values, the conflict script will be very different. I'd like to share something personal. My wife's brother and sister-in-law are of a different political persuasion than my wife and myself. In fact, in the past, particularly during the Trump administration, our conflict became so heated, I thought it would tear the fabric of our relationship, and all four of us did not and do not want that to happen. One day, in a variety of ways, we all agreed to disagree about the present political administration. We established ground rules on how we would manage our differences about the Trump administration. We have maintained these ground rules since the 2016 election. And when we visit each other, we focus on each other's thoughts and feelings about meaningful topics. And when we walk into their house, that show called the Fox News is running morning, noon, and night, and we just simply, move on. They realize that they are not going to change our beliefs or their experiences, and they have learned to do that with my wife and myself. I realize that the four of us maintain our identity, and that identity is important. My brother-in-law was in Vietnam, and when I was in graduate school, I was opposed to the war and participated in demonstrations opposing the Vietnam War. His identity was, and still is, that of a soldier, and mine was, and will continue, to be an active peacemaker opposed to war. But we both love this country. We both love each other. And we realize that we do not want to let our differences create a huge chasm between the two of us or the four of us, particularly right now, because my brother-in-law from Agent Orange and for other reasons now has acute leukemia. And his wife and sister focus on our love and concern about this good man who we did and we will continue to love very much. Once we all are aware of identity, it is important to have ground rules or guidelines for ourselves and hopefully for the person who believes differently than we do. Ideally, before a confrontation takes place, you might consider, as I have considered, that there need to be some guidelines if we're going to have effective communication and if we're going to bridge, really a bridge of peace between our differences. 1, use the personal pronoun I. This is a way of taking responsibility for the discussion, and it sharpens communication. My teenage daughter, I know you want to leave and it's Saturday morning and you don't want to clean the house, but I need for you to help and to participate in the life of this family. Number 2, stay with a presenting issue and don't throw in the kitchen sink. You know, too many issues are contaminated when too many things are thrown in. So try to stay with a issue, no more than 2 issues, until ideally there is resolution. Next, don't interrupt the other person. Sometimes it's interesting to note that when a conflict occurs, people start to crescendo and become louder and louder. Almost like if I talk louder, I will overtake your thought and your feeling. When we address an issue, stay with the topic. Even though you disagree with it, try to stay with it. You may sometimes say, before you get into it too much, I can understand your feelings, so you want to acknowledge the feeling of the other person. And if you're wrong about the feeling, listen to what their emotion is. I'm not hurt, they may say. I'm confused by what you just said. I hear that you're confused by what I just said. So sometimes it's important to mirror it back. Next, 2, allow the other person time and energy to answer your comments and your feelings. Assumptions are very costly in conflicts. If in doubt, check it out. Don't assume it out. If in doubt, check it out. Often assumptions cause us to take the feelings of others personally. Ideally, we want to take the opportunity in our discussions to look at different perspectives. And above all, I encourage you to be empathetic. A familiar word. But if we listen right now about ways of resolving conflict, we are hearing that word, try to be empathetic. As a marriage and family therapist years ago, and as an individual who worked with people with all kinds of anxiety disorders, I needed to primarily teach people how to stop from being so self-absorbed and to be empathetic, to walk in the moccasins of the other person. And I encourage you to do that. Next, watch your nonverbal communication. Pointing fingers can create a minefield. I can remember sometimes my father pointing the finger at me and said, if I've told you once, I've told you 1,000 times. Don't do that. Sounds familiar. I see some giggling going on right now. Authority figures in our past used to talk to us with styles of communication, such as pointing of fingers that did not help. Watch that you do not take some of those patterns and integrate those and project those images onto others. Another important approach is to induce or in conflict, to induce or to in conflict, to reduce it, is to use humor. Once there was a man named Alex who was retired, but still would go up on his roof to clean the gutters. And one day his wife, Angie, had told him that it scares her when he uses the ladder. Today, instead of her usual complaints, she yelled up to him, you know, it's husbands like you that turn us wives into nags. Alex paused and then laughed and carefully came down from the roof. Angie tried a different approach in communicating her complaint to her husband. And you know what? It worked. So instead of having to fight with a significant other, in this case his wife, he saw the wisdom in her words and decided to leave the dangerous setting. Often when conflict and disagreements occur, they throw a wrench in relationships, but humor and playfulness can lessen the tension and restore a sense of connection. But a warning, humor has to be used carefully and respectfully. But do keep in mind a little bit of lighthearted humor can turn conflict and tension into an opportunity for actually resolving a conflict. Hopefully humor gives you the opportunity to get your point across without the other person raising their defenses or adding to the hurt feelings they are experiencing at the time. Which brings me to my third and final point, conflict resolution. Moving towards resolution throughout a conflict needs to be a priority. During a conflict, try to activate that will towards resolution. I want this to end. I want there to be closeness. I want there to be intimacy. I want us to move on. To stay in a state of anger, distance, or isolation hinders or really even sabotages our spiritual journey. To argue excessively may really deeply harm or end relationships. As Unitarians, we believe in the, quote, infinite worthiness of every human being. When you had that last conflict, were you mindful of the infinite worthiness you felt towards that person? Or was it contaminated or put aside because of your anger? We may not agree with those who are on their own spiritual journey, and conflict may inevitably occur. But I trust the goal of peace, harmony, and justice is a central foundation we hold to be sacred in our spiritual journey. To fuel the fires of pain and distance in human relationships is something we need to address and certainly not ignore. It is easy to react when someone says something hurtful to you, but pursuing the path towards resolution is really vital in a caring, lasting relationship. When we hurt, sometimes it takes time, work, and individualized reflection to have energy to resolve the problem. Ideally, we begin to resolve an argument before the day is over. And another recommendation. The Old Testament says, do not let the sun set on your wrath. But sometimes you have arguments that go to 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, And sometimes what we need to do is set up another time and another place as soon as you can to resolve that conflict. Time also, keep in mind, does not heal all conflicts. Emotional and spiritual growth takes place when we look at the issue and we decide together to grow from the differences. And there is no doubt that if we do not learn from the conflict, we will keep repeating the same or similar conflicts again, and again. Therefore, I believe strongly that a central foundation for resolving the difference of opinion is to first of all maintain an attitude, a will of respect and love toward the other person. The love I'm speaking of is a spiritual dynamic where you love the other person unconditionally and are mindful of love before, during, and after conflict. Love serves as a lubricant for resolution. Love serves as a lubricant for resolution. Often love in the midst of conflict can clear the air and facilitate intimacy in relationship to one another. My wife, Maggie, and I have had, and I'm sure will continue, have countless times of disagreements which certainly have led to conflict. And when we have our arguments, I want to tell you, they can be a doozy. At times we say words that are hurtful, intensify the anger, and above all, cause distance between us. The issues have been over children, the maintenance of the house, money, friends, and political beliefs. Sound familiar? I'm seeing some nodding of heads. And yet there are two qualities that help us to resolve our conflicts, and they are commitment and unconditional love. We are committed to each other, and our marriage is for life, and our relationship is not some kind of a short-term journey. We want truth to be a sacred pathway towards intimacy. So we try and are not always successful to make it clear that we love each other. In fact, we have learned that in the midst of the arguments, we need to stop and remind each other that we do love and value the other, and that this marital bond is sacred. But, and there is that but, we don't always agree and like what the other said or the way the other behaved. Now, love throughout history has a spiritual quality that really is crucial in all of our human relationships. Hopefully, valuing another person, maintaining a value of compassion toward those we love, and upholding peace and justice for all are very valued qualities, and I trust they are sacred to all of us in this room. Therefore, love towards self and other needs to be a central motivation before, during, and after a conflict. And that, as we all well know, is not easy. Reverend Terrace Cooley and Carrie McDonald, both Unitarians, wrote these words entitled, "Love is Hard." Love from people, especially those who are different from you. Love that says, I see you as a person. Love that says, let your unique light shine in the world because each of our soul touches the divine mystery. Love that says, we're on a journey together and my fate is tied up with yours. Love that grabs you and won't let you go until your whole life is dedicated to siding with love. Love that changes the world. Love is hard. Do it anyway. Do it anyway. May all of you be liberated from the old patterns and habits that inhibit you from resolving differences. And may peace and justice for all be an emotional theme during your conflicts. And may love be evident in your mind, heart, and above all words, before, during, and after conflicts. For the best vehicle for managing and then resolving conflicts is to hold on that of love. Hold it tightly. Keep in mind, love is hard. Do it anyway. Amen. May we turn to our closing hymn, hymn number 219, "O Hear My People." And now, as our service comes to a close, may we be mindful that love is a central vehicle for resolving conflicts. Love of self, love of our neighbor, love of friend, and love of those who are foes. So we gather in this time of certainty now as we extinguish our light, full of the unknowns, not sure of what is going to be found in the future. But as we extinguish the chalice here, that it might glow gently in our hearts, may it be so. May it light your path as you leave this place of celebration, this place of worship, this place of fellowship. May it guide your way until we are together again. Amen. You're all invited now to that hour of taking water right out that door.
Just to let you know, the first piece I played was Sicilian by Gabriel Fauré, and the second piece was attributed to Giovanni Battista Pergolesi, and that was called Nina, or Canzonetta, and it's a love song. And now I'm going to play some Bach, Johann Sebastian Bach, my favorite, and Enid and Vince Johnson's favorite. So this is the Courante by Johann Sebastian Bach, and I'm taking this off.